Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Norm.
I'm Adam.
I'm Michael.
Michael Green, welcome to the cave. Welcome to Still Untitled.
Thank you. I am so thrilled to be here. The people who are watching this will not know that Adam just took my family around and they got to come in and see all this and be awed and enjoy every minute of it. So,
well, it was
so
delightful that you're coming to town this week. We have a mutual admiration society. Michael and I met in line at the EW party at Comic-Con a few years
did this
back.
terrible, well, not terrible. It's a fun party, but it's like when you're at Comic-Con and you're selling your wares,
Yes.
you going to parties becomes part of your job. And, you know, we all have to like put on a clean shirt. I wore a suit. And it's this one party. Now I'm remembering it. It's the one where you have to go on a Disney line, the meandering Disney line.
It's because, and specifically it's about the red carpet.
Yes, so that you
were
can
there
get,
with
you have to
American
get
Gods.
photographed. And I was there with American Gods. And normally it is my want to avoid all photographic representations of myself.
Sorry.
Simply, no, it's mostly for them. I just, come on. They're better people. And we were on a very long line together, but then we started, the words Blade Runner were uttered, and we had something to talk about.
You introduced yourself to me, and I know Neil Gaiman very well. So it was actually a really fun line.
It turned into a fun line.
Because Max Landis was on the other side, because he was there for Dirk Gently, and Max is a good friend from a long time ago. And so, welcome to San Francisco.
Thank you. I haven't been here in a while. I love it. I went to college up in the Bay Area, and I never got, it's a city that I always have a fondness for, but don't feel like get well enough. And every time I'm here, I'm like, why don't we come here more often?
Yeah.
Why are we not here all the time?
Now, you were asking me why the seat here is so uncomfortable.
Yes, I'm in. So this is a pilot. Tell me what it is.
It is an A7 Corsair ejection seat.
Okay.
From a British jet plane. The reason it's uncomfortable is because
for podcasts, they knew that they would.
No. Okay. When you pull that ejection seat, it shoots you out of the plane so fast you won't have a sensation of rising. You will literally pull the ejection handle. It'll feel like you got hit by a car, and the next time you open your eyes, you'll be 300 feet from the plane.
So you'd be unconscious, or you
not unconscious, but you pull so many G's that if the seat was soft, you would actually take a damaging secondary impact to your spine from the chair itself.
So you're like a full inch and a half shorter if you survive.
In a car accident, they often refer to the impacts as multiple. There's the car against the car. Then there's you against your seatbelt, hopefully. And then there's your organs inside of you against the inside of
Cascading
you.
effect, yeah.
Exactly.
So my head would be just like right against there, and you'd want that.
You want to be one with the seat.
And you would, and in fact, actually, the first thing that happens when you pull an ejection seat is these two cables that are attached to your boots pull your feet in.
Okay.
And then it shoots you out of the plane. Look on your face.
Oh my God. So to keep your feet in? Because I've say of the many things I learned in Mythbusters, one of the things I think about way too often, pretty much every time I fly, is that if you're in a crash, the presumption is your legs are crushed. That like the seat in front of you would smash in. And so like I'm always thinking like, should I just pull my legs up? Should I sit Indian style and it'll snap my, but like at least they won't, because I want to walk out of this.
Actually, but if you want to live through it, still the brace position is provably the best way to survive an airplane crash. I used to think it was BS, but then on Mythbusters.
Yeah, I remember you kept dropping the frame and everyone banged the crap out of their shins.
Is there high-speed footage from the perspective of being in an ejector seat being ejected?
Oh, yeah, there is. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, if you ejected on the ground, you had only like a 50-50 chance of living through that because the parachutes weren't built to eject from the ground.
Huh.
So a friend of mine's dad actually survived that. He was in a British two-seater in the 70s. His co-pilot was getting in behind him, slipped on an icy wing and reached out and grabbed my friend's dad's ejection handle. And next thing he knows, he's 300 feet above the runway thinking, oh, I've got a 1 in 3 chance of not surviving this.
I think recently, like a month or two ago, same thing happened on a demo with a journalist. In the two-seater. And
did he make it?
Yeah, I think he made it. Yeah.
Okay, good. So we can laugh at the story.
Yes.
Okay.
It's like the ejection seat, I think, falls into the category of better than death. That's what you're talking about here.
Right. It's like, here are your options. No longer existing, an intense physical pain, followed by a lifelong lingering limp.
Speaking of that, I was just filming down in New Zealand with Peter Jackson and some of his airplanes. And
Are you just going to drop that? Like,
I am.
You know,
I
was just, you know, hanging out.
But Peter Jackson has a World War I airplane factory, and I was flying in some of these planes, and the reason why will be announced later. But one of the things about the two-seater plane I was in, which is the RE-8, a British plane, is that the gunner's position is behind the pilot, and if the pilot dies, what does the gunner do? What does he just meet until you land? It turns out that there's actually like a little club in a holder next to the gunner. That
so he can
pulls
like
and there's a slot at the floor where he can chuck in and actually operate the yoke of the plane. And there's a handle on one of the aileron cables on the tail fin, so the gunner
he's
can
like
actually potentially fly the plane with a handle on a cable and a tiny little. It is better than death.
Right,
That's
right.
what this is.
And also on a swivel seat.
And I asked the pilots, I was like, have you guys ever tried flying from there? And they're like, no.
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 That's for when you're about to die and you think, you know what I should try?
Right, exactly.
I've got a minute here. I got a shot.
So, Michael, I'm not sure how old you are, but I suspect
I am
you're of
46 years old.
Okay,
Let's
so
just
a little younger
it's
than
fine.
me. Yeah. But of an age where it must have been crazy to get the call to write Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, yeah, we're jumping into that.
We'll
do that.
This is the elephant in the room that I wanted to
It's
talk
fine.
about.
No, it's okay. There are certain places I go, and it's like we're going to be talking Marvel, and then there are others. I'm going to Adam Savage's cave. We're going to be talking about Blade Runner. Yes, I remember it very distinctly because I had met Ridley prior. We discussed another project that the timing wasn't right. And then a few weeks later, it was. I mean, the word. I don't remember the wording. I remember a short email from my film agent and Jason Spitz, who will be pleased that I mentioned him, and just the words Blade Runner there, and like it was blurry. I'm like, what are they going to do an anime version? And they want me to like translate it or something? And would you want to talk about that? And my thoughts were, well, that's playing with fire. And then my second thought was, well, that's playing with fire.
Right.
And yeah, so I couldn't say yes quickly enough and got to go and, just have a discussion. And they'd been talking about an idea for a while with the original writer, Hampton Fancher, who I only got to know much later in the process when the movie was done. Now we're
fascinating.
Yeah. No, you want a fascinating conversation. Next time you are in New York, you go to Brooklyn and you go and meet with Hampton Fancher. I will help you meet him because there are fewer people who are more improbable and delightful and sweet and just fascinating than that man.
He comes across that in all the documentaries I've ever seen.
There's a documentary about him and he deserves a documentary. He's just unlikely and his life is bonkers and he's elliptical, but it's lovely and like. Everyone says the same thing when they go and meet him in his place. Is like, oh, the sarong. And it's like that's right. You go there and he's wearing a sarong and like
a little like Rick Rubin.
Yeah, and like a Hawaiian shirt that's like got a binder clip holding it together, and all around is all this wonderful art and like he's and he's lovely. Love that guy. Anyway, so he had spent some time with Ridley, kind of daydreaming about what something could be, and he wrote up a treatment that had some. I'll use Hampton's words. He said, "We were looking in the dirt for seeds," and he'd say and I would say he found some very very fertile seeds, but they needed someone to find to water and grow and turn into a screenplay and find the story and the through line and enrich it all out. And they'd spoken to a couple people, but just. It's weird to say. The reason I'm kind of like I have trouble sticking the landing on this part of the conversation because it comes down to, and Ridley liked what I had to say, and it's a strange thing because at some point you meet you're talking to the man and I get asked that question a lot like so what's it like working with a gentleman like that, and what it comes down to is at some point you have to forget that his name is Ridley Scott and talk to him like he's a person. Like I have to talk to you like you're just Adam, not Adam Savage, who I watch thousands of hours of television. And get in there because what they he needed someone to talk with about it.
And I heard almost the identical thing. Damon Lindelof is a friend, and
Right.
Damon said the same thing about working with him.
Yep.
It was like, he got he said he got the fanboy stuff out of the way in about
Get it
2
out of the way.
minutes.
You
'Cause
got to
Ridley
get it out of the
has
way.
no interest in it.
I'll even say one of the many lovely things about Ridley is like when you sit and you meet with him in his beautiful offices, and the coffee comes, he'll pour you a cup of coffee. He's like, "Hey, I don't want a cup of." He will pour it for you, and I think it's nothing he does on purpose, but like the effect of it is like, I am going to now, can we be done? Right. Like, get it over. It's like, we're now going to have a conversation where I need someone to write for me. Are you someone who I can talk with? And hey, we got on very well and hashed out a story for Blade Runner.
I have a question. I'm curious if in the process of working with Ridley on the script for 2049, if there were aspects of Blade Runner that became illuminated, the original, that became illuminated for you in ways you didn't expect.
Illuminated, ruined, all those things. Well, one thing you get to ask a lot about a process. And, you know, obviously I'm hearing his version of things. Now it's a legendary movie for a lot of reasons. And I think we all love it for many of those reasons. But you're hearing one indelible opinion.
Sure.
So, because I'm one of the people in a very strange position where I've heard the same story from Harrison Ford's perspective too, and they don't line up. But it's just one of those truth is subjectivity. Like they're all true. Every story is true from one angle or another. But yeah, what you realize, like, you know, you really start getting back to that sophomore seminar stuff about authorial intent and does it mean anything? Because there are things Ridley believes about that movie to be true or not true that you cannot convince him otherwise, but you can't say for certain.
Right.
But I did know that I now had to own those things too, which is interesting. So like,
you had to take them on.
You have to take those things on. And well, you know, my joke about Blade Runner is, you know, Rick Deckard, he's Schrodinger's cop. Like he has to be both replicant and human in every moment because you can't just, it's not, one shouldn't decide.
Well, so this actually brings up an interesting point because I remember the first time I saw 2049. I was lucky enough because I had visited the set that I got to see it in a very small Dolby's small theater down there in L.A. And I remember thinking,
oh yeah, that's where I saw it for the first time all the way through too.
It's that sound. That's still the best sound I've yet had.
It's a really great because it's small. It's like it was mixed for that experience.
Theater, yeah. It's delightful.
Pretty great.
But I remember watching the first scene unfold with the amazing Dave Bautista. And when he says something about killing your own kind, I thought,
we're taking a stand here.
We are planting that flag in the ground now. Yes. And I wondered, was that totally on purpose?
Much so. Yeah. Very much so.
Just to set the expectations right away.
You know, well, you have to, you go into it thinking, okay, what are the things we all love about Blade Runner? What are we thinking about Blade Runner? Okay. So, you know, at core, it's about... you didn't want to go and just try to recreate the is he or isn't he.
Right.
And I thought it would be an unfortunate mistake to declare is Deckard or not a replicant, but rather tell a story in which goes beyond that. But but you want people to leave with other questions.
Yeah.
And I think we have a few of those that people can be wondering, like, was this, or is it that? But yeah, the idea of just planting the flag of, let's start by saying, wait, you thought this was going to be another Rick Deckard, and like, no, he is a replicant. Boom. Now what happens?
Right.
Because then I thought, okay, now we have a chance to take him on an arc. And it was something that was a harder sell. I mean, when I came in and told the studio Alcon, like it took, and Ridley for a long time, it was just, can we tell the story you're interested in telling without doing that? So we have, and a lot of very passionate discussion, but we did land on that. And I feel like it was an important thing to do because, you know, we were telling us a different story. It was within the world of, but you don't want to just do karaoke of things you love.
No.
That's what the shower is for. That's where we sing our songs. Yeah, so we took that shot.
And with the character of Joy, especially. Can you talk about, like, that we had so many discussions after watching the movie about how that character would be perceived, how realized that character was, and even like from a male-female perspective, different takes on is this character, is it a real character?
Where did you land?
That's a good question.
I think she's a method of control.
Yeah, I think after
That's the most cynical
reviewings,
thing I've ever heard you say. I was thinking of you as like this force of positivity. He's like, method of control. Let's just
I think it's a
tamp
mirror.
them
She's
down.
a mirror.
For me,
Single-serving relationship for you.
The original nice Fight Club.
Yeah, we're gonna do that.
The initial thing that convinced me in my personal head that Deckard was a replicant was the thought experiment of, would Terrell have built? Yes, he would. Terrell would build a way to deal with his creations. He would make the most efficient robot to take care of them. Therefore, just from the fact, the idea of commerce, Deckard makes sense narratively.
Right.
And so then I saw Joy, and I just thought, oh, she's just a method of control from.
May well be. May well be. As I say, all of these things have to be true. Where do you land on that?
I think on that side as well,
Okay.
as a mirror for Kay. And his desires, and
it's funny. I argued with this. Denis and I discussed this a lot. I always felt like I wanted her to be real, and therefore but I couldn't. But the story had to allow her to be both. Is there an epochal moment in her coding where she becomes something she wasn't, or is it all fantasy, or does it matter?
And I think that Francis Bacon, the painter, talks about how every artist moves towards solving the problem they've tasked themselves with. And they move towards solving that problem, and they never end up solving the initial problem they thought they were going to solve. That's kind of the point of the whole
That's
exercise.
sort of like sometimes you start a screenplay with a line of dialogue that eventually gets cut. You're like, oh, I get the whole. You have a tuning fork of line of dialogue. Where like, I'll write a whole movie to suspend this one thing, and then you get rid of it.
The Stairway to Heaven scene from Almost Famous. Do you know about this?
No, remind me.
So it's not in the film. This is,
no, then I have no idea.
It's a famous part of the writing process. Is there's a scene in which Francis McDormand and Patrick Fugit, he wants to show his mom that rock music can have depth, and so he plays her Stairway to Heaven. It's in its entirety, and it's a scene written into the script, written, as Cameron Crowe said, into all 50 drafts of the script, where they sit and the camera watches and plays all 5 minutes of the song unbroken, just with the looks on their faces. And he said, if you'd asked me all the way through production till the end of post, what scene would not get cut, I would say that scene. And in the end, he had to cut it. But in the DVD, because they didn't get rights to the song, so what he does in the DVD, he says, go get yourself your copy of Stairway to Heaven and start playing it right when we blink this dot, and then you can watch the scene they shot.
Right. That's fantastic. That makes me so happy. There's always things where you're like, I will stand over this piece with a samurai sword, and anyone who dares try. And then you're in the editing room going like, get that shit out of here. What are you doing? Because you're a different person in the editing room is when you're writing. It's funny. I realize we're talking about Blade Runner, and I might be one of the least qualified people to talk about 2049 because when you're done with something, like there comes a point of psychological disenfranchisement with it, where like right now I have so many active stories in my head of things I'm working on right now that are just, those are the problems my brain's trying to solve.
Those are the voices in your head.
And that one, like, it is not unfair to say that I've never seen 2049. I've watched it, right? But the closest I've come was like, there was one screening we went to where we were doing a panel. And I walked into the theater for the last like 3 minutes, and I actually like sunk into maybe 30 seconds or a minute of it and felt something, and I was like, oh, that worked. And like, and that was it. And the rest is like the closest is I'll turn on the TV and it's on HBO, and like a scene comes on. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty Deacon shot. Or I remember being there for that, but it, like I still, and the dump file on it is just a survival mechanism. Otherwise, you can just keep playing it out or thinking what I could have done. And
so less the material, but your relationship with that film is in the years that leading up to and the making of. And I think you wrote a whole your journey through.
I did. I actually took some decent notes, which I rarely do. I'm very lazy about it, about journaling. But I it was so bizarre being on that. Like, you went out to Budapest and you saw it, and like I was there in prep before they started filming, and I realized it was like 3 years to the day from the first time I started pitching on it, and it was very emotional. So I just found myself like, I would email myself notes about just what this was. And then when the movie was coming out, I called the studio. I'm like, I might want to like write this up. Do you care? And they're like, we could like to read it first. And they said, sure, publish that. That's great. And but it's a process of letting go. And I think after seeing it at that Dolby screening, when it was done, I'd seen cuts, I'd seen dailies, I used to watch dailies first thing in the morning. I wake up at like 6 a.m. my kids would come down, and like, it's the most secure movie in the world, and my then 7-year-old daughter would pop on my lap and go, what's Robot Boy doing today? And I'd say, remember, just don't tell your friends, but today he's gonna shoot some people.
Before we continue with this week's episode, I want to let you know that this week's episode of Still Untitled was made possible by TripleByte, because applying to programming jobs sucks. You have to put in the right keywords in your resume, you spend hours and hours on phone screens and take-home projects, and that's assuming the company even responds to your application. Well, if you're a software engineer, TripleByte can help. They work with over 400 top tech companies, from big names like Dropbox and Adobe to exciting startups. You do one brief online interview with them, and if you do well, you get straight to final interviews with the companies on their platform. It's like the common app for software engineers. TripleByte does not look at your resume or where you went to school. All they care about is if you can code, because that's what really matters. You shouldn't be judged just by a piece of paper that doesn't matter anyway. Well, apply now at triplebyte.com/untitled. That's TripleByte, B-Y-T-E, byte as in 8 bits. And as a special offer for listeners of the show, if you take a job through TripleByte, they'll offer you a $1,000 signing bonus. Now back to the conversation.
You used a turn of phrase when we were talking on Twitter, Twitter DMs a few weeks ago, where I said I really loved Blade Runner 2049, and you said I'm really happy with how it turned out. I realized
that's that thing.
It's a very specific thing, because you hand this over, and what you hand over could also get butchered before
that happens sometimes too, and sometimes you're more involved than other times. As a screenwriter, you're, unlike television, film, your relationship to the process is entirely subject to the director's disposition,
right?
Because it's director's medium, and that's the wonderful thing about it. So sometimes, when you're working with someone masterful like Denis Villeneuve, that's great,
Right.
And he and I got on very well during development. We spent a lot of time together. He's very patient with me. There was a lot of good back and forth in a way that it was a lot of trust on both parts, and
that's rare.
And it is rare, and he's just lovely. He's just one of the nicest people, and
I remember Richard LaGravenese talks about how surprised he was that Gilliam brought him into Fisher King, the whole process of shooting Fisher.
Right. But what was an interesting thing for me, so Denis and I got on very well, very hand in glove throughout writing, and for a good year of development, and then came out and did some stuff for them during prep, but then time came for shooting, and the first few days of shooting, like, my experiences are usually again, staying hand in glove, but and this was a new one, because it was a very positive moment where I realized, he's moved past needing me. And I realized every time I would be talking with him, he was being polite. Like, he was being very nice and chatty, but I could tell, like, he's done.
Wow.
The script is done, and he's moving into this new thing. So what I should do is step back and watch and observe, learn, ask questions. If say something, see something. I mean, writer on set, like, when there's a concern, there are absolutely times and ways to voice that. But I also knew, like, I'd seen a bunch of his movies. This guy, I knew he had it in his teeth a year prior. So all I had to do was let him do that, and it would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But while I was there, I was going to be as involved as I could. But sometimes being involved means just get the fuck out of the way. Can I say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Bad word.
We can take it.
My son is here. He's like, Daddy says what? But yeah, so it did turn out great, and it turned out great because of the efforts of a lot of people. But the making of things was, like, for the large part, I was done. I mean, they came to me a few times during it and said, hey, you need some fixes here. We're trying doing this. Can you give us an alternate on that? We're worried about this. Can you give us a secondary scene so we can shoot that as a parachute for this? Like, all that fun stuff. But my work was done.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because we're in this, what people keep calling the golden age of television. There's scripted, serialized plots are expanding in wonderful ways. And having worked in both the confines of film and the potential more expansive
they're
confines
just
of
different
television.
confines.
I'm wondering what it feels like from your perspective, because you're the one enjoying taking an adaptation and letting it stretch out for a bunch more hours than you've normally been given.
They're different mediums, so the goals are different. One, you're trying to fill up more space. One, you're looking for, like, what's the ongoing tale, and one, it's how can we blow out this story and tell everything we have to say in a bit of time. I don't know if I have anything unique to say on this subject that I'm sure other writers will say on great podcasts that I can recommend. John August and Craig Mason's script notes. I'll say this, because I did have an interesting experience recently where I'm helping some writers. I'm overseeing a story historical story that they brought to us, and we were thinking, great, that's an amazing, like, at first I thought, is it a movie? And like, no, we want to do this as a series. And they told me how they want to, and I'm helping them develop it out. And a series of circumstances occurred where we suddenly thought, rather than like everything we were doing was, how is this going to be 6 years? How are we going to tell an ongoing tale? You know, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 7, but you're really thinking, how are we going to expand out the story? Where we thought, you know what if we did it as 2 years? Like, it is not a mini series. It is not an ongoing series. It's this new thing that's the length it wants to be. You know, like, we realized it wanted to be 16 hours with, you know, some time in between the two.
Right.
And that is neither.
Yeah, that's a middle ground.
This is a lungfish.
Yeah.
It's some new thing that's just like crawling out from the muck and saying, and we probably wouldn't be the first ones to do it if we did it that way. But why not? Because you have this new time where not only are people trying things, but you have places like a Netflix where they don't need to recoup their investment by having more episodes. Their whole state of intentions, we're just looking for interesting things to make people want to come and spend their money on the subscription service. So given the right host, that may work. We might find another host says, you know, we'd really like it to be a series, and we'll go right back to that. But it's a great creative moment where you can just think, we have this story. I have this idea. What does it want to be?
Yeah.
Like, you used to have to think, like, how do I smash it into that box? You know, if you had a genre idea, great. How do you turn it into two cops trying to solve magic crimes, right? Because that was what network television would say. You know, it's like, well, it's either a soap or a procedural. Those are the genres.
Right.
And so you had to, you know, machine it down into fitting those things. And now it's kind of like, you know, is this a joke? Is it a Saturday Night Live sketch? Is it an epic poem? Is it a web series? Is it a mini? Is it, who knows what it is?
I find myself wondering if you might write a scene and then go, oh, I wrote a scene for the feature version, but I
That's
have
true.
more time.
No, you definitely have that. I mean, I've written television scripts where I'm like, all right, that you can't put that many short scenes in television script because, you know, you just need time in spaces for two people to talk.
Right.
Yeah, wait, I had something occurred to me that was almost witty. I almost had a witticism. It's gone.
I'm sorry.
Well, as a creative endeavor, do you prefer, like, is there an ideal length of time you want to be committed to a project and invest in developing characters for? Is it for a movie, 2 years, 6 years, ongoing series? Like,
I think I always crave doing whatever I'm not doing at the time. It's like the
that checks out.
no, I try to. I mean, you're usually juggling a couple things. You know what? I am happiest when we're making something. When we're taking an idea and actualizing it into a script, or we're taking a script and actualize it into a cut. You know, or we're shooting something, or we're producing something. Like just making stuff with your hands, but I guess not with your hands. Because I don't know how to do that. Like, I can't draw.
Really?
I cannot draw. Fun fact: Ridley Scott paints like
Oh,
Dutch master.
I love his drawings. I think I recently.
But have you ever seen his paintings?
No.
They're
I didn't realize he
He
painted.
paints with every movie you see, the world is deprived to like museum quality paintings. And the funny thing is, if you ask him about it, he goes, "I hate fucking painting," because what it means is I have time for it.
Right.
And he wants to be shooting. Yeah, but I've seen some of the paintings.
I love his line. I mean, I've been a fan of his storyboards forever because he loves Mobius more than almost any other living human.
I have stolen many of his sketches because when you're talking to him, if you say something, when you say something he likes, and he just starts sketching it, and if you move quickly, they can be yours. Probably the best one I have, because I have a lot of great Alien ones. I've got great Blade Runner ones. You know, because I worked with them on what became Alien Covenant, and like in the early days of Blade Runner, you just kept sketching eyes, like eyeballs and pyramids, and I'm like, this is the greatest. Give me all the eyeballs and pyramids. But at one point we were doing some story and he was really bored, I could tell, because he was sketching me, and then he slid it over and said, "That's you if you were skinny." And then wait, there's a punchline I can deliver now, because that was already funny enough. And a couple months ago, I finally went on the diet I should have gone, and I actually lost some weight, and it looked like me.
He was right.
He could see under the shmoo.
Wow.
What was the bone structure that might have been there that no one
That's exactly the superpower I want Ridley Scott to have.
to like look in and go like, I can see what this should be.
What is beneath?
If you would just stop eating cereal, you would look like this.
do you have time to enjoy content? Enjoy things that you don't write? Enjoy things?
I enjoy
movies?
the hell to things I don't write. Yeah, I hate things. Never watch anything I write. Yeah, no. I always watch in opposition to what I'm doing. So if I'm writing a drama, I'm watching comedy.
What are you enjoying right now?
Oh goodness, we just finished Pen 15, which just gave me endless joy.
It's the Hulu
It's a
series.
Hulu show.
Yeah.
Pen 15. If you write it out, it says the word penis. It's
that one.
It's just delightful. Catastrophe just ended, and Rob Delaney Sharon Horgan. Like, it's just
those two
amazing.
Yeah.
It stuck the landing so beautifully. I was so touched by it, and I laughed
good.
my guts out.
The second season really bothered me. The fight.
What?
There was
The fight. Yeah,
the
it's
fighting.
divisive.
The fighting it was too disturbing to me. So I love the way.
Do you watch a show like that to escape or to represent?
Right,
and it's tough.
I found it very stressful.
I think I enjoyed it because my wife and I were just loving each other so much at the time. We're like, oh, look at these poor people. I know, always. That makes it sound like we're not in a good. I'm lucky enough to be in a marriage where I can enjoy watching other couples fight. How's that? Broad City just ended beautifully. I was really touched by that. I don't know. There are a lot of half hours. I mean, every time I watch half hour, I'm jealous because when you're breaking hour television, you're always like, you get to the midpoint, you're like, oh, we could be done now. And it's funny enough, I did just start sketching out a single camera half hour that I would love to do. So, nice. Not that they're any easier; they're harder for many, many different reasons. But I haven't done one, and I'm always curious about like learning a new form. Like that's kind of the fun of, like, what haven't I done? How can I challenge? What's the puzzle I haven't solved?
Right, because every one of these is a different. Right, it's all about
different selection
playing
pressures.
within the different restrictions.
It's just switching medium out as much as I can. Like I got into comics a bunch of years ago, and it was like the main reason was like, how do you write one of them? I mean, I've read a million of them,
right?
But like, this is a different way of communication. Feature script is a different way of communicating than a television script is a different way of communicating with. And I love comic scripts because you're basically writing a love letter to an artist. You're talking to one person. And you can call them up on the phone and say, "How do you like being communicated with?" Or you're writing to their strengths, and you don't have to edit yourself if you want to describe something a lot, or you can just say, "Batman strikes a pose," and
There are aspects to that, like the early Frank Miller collaborations with people like Bill Stankovich, the Elektra Assassin series, one of those. The unbelievable collaboration between a vision and a next.
Well, and Neil Gaiman, I think, said, relayed by his wife, that comics is the only medium that he can think of that you can have silence and force the reader to engage with silence in a way that you can't with audio, with video, because you look at an empty panel or
it can still be interesting.
Yeah, a character with no speech bubble, nothing.
Yeah,
and that is a moment, and you engage with that moment and digest it.
That's awesome. I'm curious, what is there anything coming up that you're really excited about?
Well, we're talking about comics. I'm involved in the Blade Runner comic we're putting together. That I think I'm allowed to say this. We're hoping to have it out for Comic-Con this year.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I'm doing it with Mike Johnson, my longtime friend and comic collaborator. Mike Johnson's this wonderful guy. We went to college together, and he was the only person I knew who, other than my roommate, who read comics. So like, he was the guy. Like everyone, most people, it was about like, God, it was mostly trying to. I was in the sciences at the time and realized that is probably not where my brain is. And just trying to figure out academic stuff, and like, here's the one person who's like, we just trade Batman books, and talk about Sandman at the time, like, and then we got out of college and we kept talking about comics, and I started writing my first one, and I was doing Superman Batman, and I was on like the third issue I was doing, and my first show that I was running got picked up to series, and I realized I was going to start missing deadlines. So I said, hey, instead of reading all these comic scripts that I'm writing, telling me what you think, because I always sent him stuff, why don't you help me write them? And he's gone on. He's written more Star Trek comics than anyone else out there. And so when
how awesome!
Yeah, he's great. I mean, he's got shelves of books, at your local comic store. So when they said Blade Runner comics, I said, let me call Mike. And so yeah, we're having a good time doing those. Just got the second book. I think I just got pencils, and that's the fun. The reason it's doing comics is you write something out, you talk about it, and then some artist sends you these beautiful papers.
It's like a pen pal relationship.
Evan Narcisse said the same.
It is a pen pal. It's exactly that. And you get a lot of emails that are bummers, and then you get an email that's just like, look at that, there's a spinner. Yeah, and it's just like there's some things I do. My brother always says, like, you're doing exclusively for bar mitzvah you. Like, for the bar mitzvah me,
that's
just
a
like
great. That's exact. Yeah.
Like 13-year-old me is like, you got to do what?
Yeah, I engage in that calling across the void between 10-year-old, 12-year-old me and now all the time.
Come on.
It was actually walking onto the Covenant set, which was the second time I had met and conversed with Ridley, and having him walk in and go, "Good morning, Adam," and my head exploded.
I had one of those recently. Harrison Ford knows me he called me Michael Green. like as if it's one word. Which is, I'm like, as nicknames go. I'm like, Harrison Ford knows my name. All right, that's pretty good.
Have you noticed, by the way, what an amazing impression of Harrison Ford Mark Hamill does?
I just saw that on Twitter. That was fantastic.
I saw Mark at a conference recently. He was at a conference recently, and in his stories about Star Wars, it's like he kept on referring. Yeah, you do you, kid. He kept.
Well, it's a great voice actor.
It is so spot on.
Yeah, it's true. Mark Hamill is.
He's the greatest. Yeah. Someone, speaking of Twitter, someone had the "Who's your Batman Joker?" and I'm just like,
yeah,
come on.
Yeah,
Conroy
it's really
Hamill.
hard to.
Conroy Hamill's mine. Yeah. So reaching across. So other things coming up. What do I have coming up? Yeah, there's some things in the works. They all going to take a really long time to come out, though. It's funny. Like in no other field are people like, wow, that took a long time. I'm like, my brother builds buildings. No one ever says, why isn't that building?
Well, so
these things take years.
Did you work on the second season of American Gods?
I did not.
So then you also have the experience frequently of watching other people take stuff that you've started the ball rolling and rolling it further.
That has happened.
That's got to be far out.
It's a strange one. I can't look. My relationship with anything I've ever worked on is once it is out of my hands, whether that, I just noticed you have the fifth element, the elements. Oh, sorry. There's a lot to look at here. And it's very hard to maintain eye contact in this particular room.
It's true.
And talk about the least interesting thing to me is me and my career. So now it's like, all right, what were we talking about?
So
once it's out of my hand, whether it's a script, whether it's a cut, after I finished a sound mix on an episode, I can't look at that anymore. My personal way of relaying it, and maybe this is inappropriate, and you can cut it as well. It's sort of like watching an ex on their like honeymoon. It's like you want them to be happy, all the best to you. I don't need to see it.
That's
when something moves on without
totally
you.
Get that.
But no, and if it's a movie I've worked on, and you watch it, you have that relationship, and then at some point you say goodbye. And maybe in a couple decades, I will go back and be able to watch 2049 and like actually experience it. And I look forward to it because I've heard it's good. But yeah, no, nothing. And in anything I've ever worked on that's taken over by someone else, like even shows that I spent time on that were glorious and you just move on, and after doing a few seasons, I if they're on in the house, it's nails on a chalkboard.
Wow.
It's so strange. It's just idiosyncratic for me. I mean,
it totally makes sense though.
You want the temporary amnesia pill.
Yeah, if you could just boom and it's gone, like that'd be great.
Just for the day, watch a thing, enjoy it, and then like, oh, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I just couldn't. I mean, I think I turned on TV and like a Smallville episode I'd written was on, and it was a good 11 years later, and I'm watching it and I see a scene. And I'm like kind of trying to like just give myself like just sit here for 3 minutes, being a little zen about it. And something just sounded wrong, and I had to open up my laptop, and I realized, oh right, there was an onset change on that line. And it was just like and I'm like, just don't do this. It's not good for you. It doesn't help. You're not in a better mood. Like my rule generally when it comes to the intake and outtake like of how I spend my time and like with art is does it make you write more, faster, better? Like, just don't do things so like looking at old things doesn't make me feel better, write better. Like I don't learn from
That's a really great axiom too.
So like, I always chide my staff writers for if I see them on Twitter, because I'm like, oh, you're on Twitter? Where's the scene I'm expecting? Or where's that book that you said you wanted to read, or the movie, you keep telling me you want to write a pilot. You could, but if you told me that being on Twitter, like, okay, for me, my excuse is I get out my political anxiety and it frees me for the rest of the day to not think about it.
Yeah.
At least that's what I tell myself.
Michael Chabon uses a program that disconnects him from the internet for an allotted period of time, and unless he restarts his computer, which he said is just past the shame threshold required to keep him writing.
A good friend of mine just told me he took Twitter off his phone. So it's just like, he keeps it exclusively on his iPad, which he routinely only looks at in the morning and at night, which to me means while he's pooping.
Twitter's great while you're pooping.
And I have IBS, so I'm on Twitter too much.
I think that's
we are.
I think that's a great place to stop.
You are looking for a title for your podcast. I may have given it to you. Still pooping.
Michael Green, thank you so much for
having me.
San
This is
Francisco
great.
And coming on the podcast. Hopefully it's not the last time for either.
Thank you for letting me close on a shit joke.
It's always good to go. As the farther into the bathroom you get, the funnier I think it is.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. It's great to meet both of you. Been a fan a long time. And Yeah, if the Excalibur sword is gone,
you
know where it
who
is.
took it.
I will be wandering around San Francisco with an enchanted broadsword.
Anything coming up on the website this week?
Yes, I was at Monsterpalooza 2 weeks ago, so videos from that event is still rolling out. Our friend Daryl Maloney, the Broken Nerd, has a project, next parts coming out on the site this week. And Adam, now that you're back from your production,
start filming some one-day builds. We've got to get them going. I'm really sorry it's been so long. I didn't think it was going to be this long.
Do you know what you're building next?
I do. I have a long list, but I think I'm going to start off in a kind of a comforting place with the one-day builds. That's all I'm going to say.
That's all he's going to say. I'll ask you offline. Okay.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
thanks for listening this week. And once again, I want to let you know that Still Untitled is made possible this week by the fine folks at Triple Byte, because applying to programming jobs sucks. From endless applications to countless hours of technical screens, with Triple Byte, there's a better way. You do one online interview, and then you go straight to final interviews at hundreds of companies, from tech giants like Dropbox to exciting startups. It's like the common app for software engineers. No resume needed. Apply now at triplebyte.com/untitled. And if you take a job through TripleByte, they'll offer you a $1,000 signing bonus. That's triplebyte, BYTE.com/untitled. We'll see you next week.